Exactly how powerful are we when we harness the power of our mind and focus? We're going to find out today with a fascinating guest, Phoenix Montgomery, mentalist and hypnotherapist, on today's show, Accentuating the Positive with Karen Swain on the United Public Radio Network and the UFO Paranormal Radio Network. Stay tuned.
You got to accentuate the positive. Wow, I feel good. A little bit of feel good goes a long way.
You're listening to Karen Swain, teacher of deliberate creation, accentuating the positive, showing you a way to a better life.
Accentuating the positive, it's not just fad, it's sanity. Who in their right mind would accentuate anything else?
If you feel like that's what you want to do.
Hey, welcome to another show on ATP Media with Karen Swain on the UFO Paranormal Radio Network and the United Public Radio Network, streaming on syndicated radio across 107.7 and 105.3 FM all over the United States and Canada. And we're streaming today on about several platforms. We're on Rumble, Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, all over the place. And I have a fascinating person to introduce you to. He's from Sydney, Australia, Phoenix Montgomery. Welcome to the show, Phoenix. Oh, I think you're muted. Yeah,
Thank you very
much. Hang on, I muted you again.
Thank you very much for having me.
I met Phoenix through Catherine and Mick, who put on the Cosmic Consciousness Conference in Uluru at the end of the year, right round about Christmas time, just before Christmas, because Catherine asked me to put on a couple of the speakers on the show, and she mentioned I've only put on a couple, and you're one of them. And I looked at you, and I saw the show, man. I saw all the shows that you did and all the television stuff that you did, and I was a little skeptical because I thought, is this guy just about all show? And then I met you and I'm like, I realized that no, actually you have an amazing spiritual background that has brought you to this place of being the mentalist that can amaze audiences and do what you do. So I've never had anyone like you on the show. So I'm so excited to hear a bit about your story, Phoenix.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I appreciate that very much.
Let me tell you, Moby's with us. Hi, everyone. Excited to tune in today. Thanks, darling. Moby says, yeah, looks good today, Karen. Thanks, honey one. Let me tell you a little bit about Phoenix. Phoenix Montgomery's journey has taken him from training with monks in China to honing his skills in hypnosis in Las Vegas and London. When Phoenix was 17 and 20, he traveled to China to study with the monks, training as a kung fu practitioner. During this time, he gained a lot of spiritual knowledge and meditation practices. And at 25, he looked into hypnosis and how the mind affects our reality, diving deeply into the mind-body connection. Throughout his career, Phoenix has consulted for billionaires in deception detection, opened for top rock stars, and headlined numerous comedy, hypnosis, and psychological entertainment shows. God, you've done it all, honey. He has been a featured speaker at the Mind, Body, Spirit Festival, which is a festival we have here in Australia and all over Australia, actually, and consulted on intuition studies at the New South Wales Future Minds Department at, what's the New South Wales Future? Is that at university?
Yeah, that's a department in University of New South Wales.
Whoa, I didn't know we had that. That sounds amazing.
We do. It's amazing. It is.
And Phoenix thrills and entertains audiences worldwide with his amazing talents, and has been international mentalist on stage and an on-stage hypnotist. He's built a renowned career and has a television and corporate entertainer, keynote speaker, and an inspiring facilitator. His impressive media presence include multiple appearances on Australian Has Got Talent. Oh, you've been on Australia's Got Talent. And Behave Yourself. I don't know what Behave Yourself is. And you've been on a lot of primetime. You consulted on the X-Men films.
I did.
What were you doing on the X-Men films? How
I
were you
was a
consulting?
trainer and consultant for one of the main characters in one of the movies, Gambit, who's a very popular character if you follow the comics.
Oh, wow. Mark says here, I was just asking Phoenix that actually. I live in Sydney and would love to find out where I can see you speak. Yeah. Well, you can see him speak in Uluru in December, but Phoenix has just had a show at Ashfield. He's just had a show, a public show, but I was just talking to him about that, Mark, and he said mostly he does private consult, like corporate jobs and where, parties and stuff like that. And I said, when's your next public show? I'd love to come to your next public show. And he said Ashfield asked you back, but you don't know when that'll be in Sydney.
Yes, and it depends as well. If Mark's wanting to see one of the speaking engagements, then I'll certainly post some of those. They're more likely to be public. Shows tend to be corporate or cruise ships or things along those lines, but they do pop up every now and again. So I will keep posting them so everyone can see.
Well, as I say, this is a delight for me because I've always looked at people like mentalists and magicians, and they seem to talk the talk, but it's all about show and entertainment. And I wonder if it's all just, mirrors and smoke and mirrors, or if they're really as connected to like mind power and spiritual ability and psychic ability as they look when they're entertaining people. Like I just have loved David Blaine. I'm sure you're a big fan of David Blaine. Are you a big fan of David? So tell us, amazing, thank you, Mark says. So tell us about your journey, Phoenix. Like what got you into all this?
Yeah, well, first of all, I suppose, just to elaborate on what you were saying there, I tend to keep things very separate. I'm very aware of the nature of, let's say, as a mentalist, you have a sliding scale, and on this end, you would have someone who would say is a purist and only uses psychological techniques, psychology basically, such as hypnosis, profiling, body language reading, influence, and they blend it with psychological illusion. Don't get me wrong, but let's say down this end, you've got someone who's doing what you would call mental magic, which is designed to look like what a purist mentalist would do, but as psychological illusion behind it. Now, everyone sits somewhere on a sliding scale between those two as a performer. And then you've got a variant of that, and I will say there's plenty of mediums that are still using these techniques over here as well to make it look like they're reading minds. But I've always been very cautious to keep, I guess, the two sides of my life separate because, as I'm sure we'll get into certain areas that I don't often talk about publicly, I don't want this to dilute the reality of what this was either as an experience. So yes, you mentioned training with the monks. I'd spent years here in Australia training very hard, and then made my way over to China and learnt the meditations, learnt all sorts of lessons from that incredible experience, and then found later on when I was studying hypnosis a lot of the parallels between, say, meditations and hypnosis, and have my own experiences of what the mind can do. And some of the people I've had the joy of working with and consulting with, say in London, for example, we push the boundaries of what's possible with hypnosis, and it's just absolutely incredible what the mind can do. There are so many areas that we take for granted, like imagination. You just think of that as formulating pictures or sounds in your head. It is so much more than that. But yes, I'm more than happy to go into that sort of thing. And just to cover what you're saying, I totally agree. Like as a showman, that is an occupation. I take a lot of the skills from what I do and present them on stage, because when you have these skills, whether it's hypnosis or influence or something like pickpocketing, you can either use those things for good or you can use them for bad. I choose to use these skills to make people happy, but that doesn't detract from the other areas of my study, and they don't often cross over unless I want them to for some particular reason.
Yeah, but couldn't you use the entertainment to educate people about the power of their mind? I mean, rather than having pure entertainment. Like I've watched a couple of your YouTube videos of you hypnotizing people on stage where you get them to believe something and then they believe it. Like I was showing my group yesterday how you had a guy on stage, and I don't know what you told him, but he couldn't move his legs. And then you put this money in front of him and said, come on, here's $100, here's $50. If you get up, you can have it. And he couldn't get up because what did you say to him? Like, how did you make him do that?
That's exactly right. And that particular video that you saw was in a show, because sometimes in a big show like that, I will put a little, I guess, Easter egg of inspiration in there, because first of all, you see hypnotists a lot of the time, and particularly common in hypnosis. Like, that is a great ride. It's like catching a big wave as a surfer. Once you get it, you're great. But I don't agree with the traditional hypnotists that would bring people on stage and do stupid things and humiliate them. Instead, I bring people up on stage and they leave feeling like rock stars. They feel inspired. They realize that they can do more than they could have before, and everyone still had a great time and they've been laughing the whole way. But I do have a keynote that I do deliver called Mindset, which actually will be one of the ones featured in Uluru. And that is about the mind, and that is about the potential of it. And I do hypnotize people in that set as well. And that particular routine that you're talking about, yes, all I've told the person is that they are stuck to the chair. And from that point, they believe they're stuck to the chair. And because their mind believes in that and wraps itself around that idea, it becomes a reality for them and they can't get up. It's also one heck of a convincer too for anyone in the crowd that's thinking, are they not? When you put $500 down in front of them, which I may not do now at Uluru because you'll have everyone coming up and pretending. But when people see that and they can't get up off the chair to get that money that's right there in front of them, it's an incredible metaphor, but it's also an incredible demonstration of how, money can be a motivator, but your belief overrides everything. And if they believe they can't get up, then they can. So,
absolutely. Your
but it
belief
is very fun.
Belief is the strong. I call myself a teacher of deliberate creation, always teaching people about the power of their mind and asking them to look at what they're believing as they're creating their reality, rather than playing the victim. Oh, this guy was pissing me off and he was upsetting me and this always happens to me. Why does this always happen to me? It's like, what are you believing about yourself, and how is your belief creating this? And this, what you're talking about, mentalism and hypnotism, this is a demonstration of just how powerful our beliefs are. They can create an experience. Well, they can create, let me reiterate, they create every experience that we have because we're looking through the lens of our perception. We're looking through the lens of our belief, and we're experiencing, what does Wayne Dyer say? You don't create what you want, you create who you are. You're experiencing your world through what you believe about yourself. And so demonstrating this sort of stuff, telling someone they can't move, even when they've got money in front of them that they want to go grab, but they believe they can't move, that's what they're experiencing because they believe it.
Yes. Yeah. I think Carl Jung said, I am not what's happened to me, I am who I choose to be. It's a similar sort of thing. But let me just clarify as well, in the demonstrations of mentalism, say I'm performing a mentalist show, there is a blend of psychological illusion in there. I'm going to be the first person to say that I'm not mind reading people like that or anything like that. I'm blending hypnosis or influence or body language reading, but with psychological illusion too, because it's like the cherry on top of the pie. So there's elements in there. And when I design those shows, I design them so that your brain can't figure out which is the actual skill or which is psychological illusion, so that at the end, the audience's brain sort of default back to just having fun. Whereas a hypnosis show, 100%, that's all hypnosis. So, yeah.
Okay, so when you're reading people's minds, so I also watched, it's on, let me show you. We were just talking about, Phoenix has got a couple of YouTube channels, but this is one that's got quite a few of his performances on here. And I just watched that one. Sydney Mentalist Phoenix reads the audience for a television station. And so it looks like you're reading people's mind. I was watching it this morning thinking, how's he doing that? Has he got an earpiece in? Even though I'm a psychic and I can't do that, but I can do similar stuff. I'm still skeptical. How's he doing that? Like, how are you doing that? How are you reading?
I can give you my word, hand over heart, there's absolutely no earpiece in that routine by any means. I won't go too far into it.
Is it there's a blend of psychic ability? Is it psychic? No,
it's not psychic ability. It's not. Okay. It's a combination of techniques to use to create the illusion of that, as well as I was talking to the professor. We filmed there is a documentary that I can't say too much about, coming out to do with the Future Minds department and what they've been studying. But we were talking about that too. And there's an element in that routine where if I can read or obtain enough information about a person that's out in the audience, that I can kind of sandwich in between some intuition. I feel like Donald Trump. So any intuition or sort of guesswork, educated guesswork, it's amazing how much I will hit a correct without I don't know how that happens. Maybe it's luck. Maybe it's just that I'm relaxed in that state. But no, typically looking at those routines, I am not engaging directly with people's minds and reading their minds, and certainly not talking to any past on relatives or anything like that. No, I'm more of a psychological entertainer rather than claiming to be psychic as such.
Well, they've put a blindfold on you, so you're not reading their body language, and I don't actually understand what was going on, but you were amazing, everyone in the audience, like in the studio and in the audience. They're going, how does he do this? And I've got to say, it was amazing me too. Like, how is he doing this? So I don't understand how. I suppose you can't give away your secrets, but I don't understand how you're doing it. You're picking random people out, and you're telling them their names, and you're telling them when they went on a cruise last and who they went on with, and all this information's coming through. You can't.
I couldn't possibly know. Yeah.
You can't read that from looking at, and you've got a blindfold on, so you're not even looking at their body language, or cold reading, as people have called it. People aren't psychic. They're looking at you and they're cold reading you, some people have said, but you're not even doing that. So,
well, I mean, cold reading you can do with a blindfold on. There's elements of cold reading there for sure. I actually find with, as I say, if I've ascertained enough information about someone by whatever means, whether it is glancing, whether it is, whatever method, that gap in the middle, when I'm blindfolded, I actually feel more comfortable with that. I imagine it's similar with a blind person, how their hearing is heightened and every other sense is heightened to that degree. Not to their level, obviously, but there's just something about having your eyes closed and your mind being able to pay more attention. Again, I'm not saying that I'm picking up on any particular waves or anything out there, but again, this is also what I say. I draw a line. I try and be straight up about, okay, that is a performance piece versus what I'm talking about in other areas. This is, truth. And I really don't want those. I try to avoid a crossover, because I feel like the area of psychological illusion there, if that were said about the other things that I'm talking about or doing, well, again, I don't want it to pollute the idea of that. And that's why I'm very honest and very straight up. This is a performance piece. This is entertainment. This, however, this is the mind. This is real. This is my experiences outside of that. So,
okay.
Yeah.
So let's explain to people, what is a mentalist? I mean, obviously there's that famous show, another Aussie, another Australian actor. I actually lived with his wife when I was 19 in a house in Bondi, and we hated each other. Actually, she was 19, I was 23. What's his name that plays the mentalist? That Australian
Baker, isn't that you're thinking of?
Yeah. Baker, yeah, that guy. Anyway, so he says, I'm not psychic, I'm a mentalist. Like, what in your understanding is a mentalist? What's a mentalist?
Yes. So as I was saying before, it's kind of an umbrella term, and outside of that, I think of an octopus head, and then each leg is everything from like body language reading, profiling, hypnosis, advanced memory training, advanced speed math, and psychological illusion, which would mean like decorations in terms of psychological magic effects, I guess, if you want, rather than having the dexterity of using cards, you're using mind stunts to create that illusion. So that's more the decoration on top of the actual psychological ability, but none of it typically is claimed to be psychic, and most of us don't. You've got a fraction that do. Quite often they go on to choose paths in mediumship or something along those lines, and then the rest of us who are more strict about, no, this is what we're doing here. I mean, there's plenty of times in these routines, though, that you'll somehow get answers. And I do have a line of people after the show, almost every show, saying, no, you are psychic, you are psychic. But I know what I'm doing in those sorts of things, but you'd be amazed at how often you come off stage and think, how did I get that one? But yeah, it's that room for error that allows it.
Look, I've said this to people before, because I work as a psychic. I don't classically do your speaking to your dead relatives, reading your future. I more channel, exalted information and tell people who their soul is and why they're here on earth. But I am psychic. I put myself out there as psychic. And when I hear the explanation of a mentalist, like, you're just very observant, you're observing everything, you're seeing everything, and you're putting it all together. Actually, that's what you're doing as a psychic. You're observing beyond the physical. You're observing their energy field. You're observing how they feel. When psychics are reading, like doing readings, like, you can read on different levels. You can read in people's energy field. So you can observe their feelings and their thoughts and their fears and their belief systems. And then you can move outside of the sort of energy field that's surrounding their personality body and move into like the subconscious and the superconscious and contact their higher self. But it is a process of observation, like listening, deep listening and observation of what you're experiencing. I'm feeling this, like I've often felt people's illness because I'm feeling it in my body. So I'm observing that I'm feeling a pain here. And, you know, you see readers say, did your mother have heart problems when she died? And they're feeling that tightness in their chest or,
Right.
so it is a process of observation, being psychic, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. Which would make sense. That's what I was saying about the blindfold as well. When you were saying that you can hear things as well, if you close your eyes for a moment, and the same. I mean, you can pick up a lot, and I teach this in the body language and report sessions about mirroring people as well. If you naturally tend to mirror someone's body language, your physiology switches to whatever they're feeling because of the shape and position of your body as well. And you can actually lead them out of that by, if you're mirroring them for a little bit and then you tend to sit up straight and they straighten up, then their actual body chemistry or how they're feeling will change as well. So yeah, you may be more in tune with that sort of thing than you realize.
Well, you say that people say you are psychic when you come off stage. We all are psychic. This is something that I talk passionately about. I mean, psychic ability is so innate to the human experience. In fact, the only sense that is online when we're born is our psychic sense, because we have to learn to smell, to taste, to hear, to see. All of that is learnt. But we have on tap our psychic ability. We know exactly what our mother is thinking and feeling. We were once, you know, a part of that body until the umbilical cord is cut, and then so our psychic sense. But then as the other senses come online and we focus on those, we tend to like ignore our psychic senses, but they're operating all the time. There is not one person. I read in the Seth books. Do you know what the Seth books are? Jane Roberts channeled books in the 60s, and the entity or stream of consciousness called themselves Seth, said that every human on the planet is operating telepathically. You could not drive on your roads if you were not. And so it's that awareness that we are all connected mentally or psychically or energetically, and we are tapped in and feeling and knowing what's going to happen. But are we focused on that? Are we aware of that? What do you want to say to that, Phoenix?
Yeah, I'm actually all for that too. A lot of mentalists will be straight down the line as well, and I feel there's probably people that might be apprehensive, thinking, "Oh, mentalist, first of all, showman, and also skeptic." Yeah, I think honestly, to have an open mind, you have to be open equally to. There's a lot of bull out there as there's potential truth as well, and the art is really sifting to find what is the truth. As much as I could look at certain acts or performers in terms of what they do, and I'm saying performers, but I mean, I've personally seen mediums who are using techniques. That's one thing to say that you're talking to dead relatives. However, there's the other side of it where you think of someone that you haven't seen for 10 years and then you bump into them the very next day, or you know it's the second where the phone's going to ring, and areas like that. The professor at Uni of New South Wales, Joel Pearson, has a book called Intuition, and it's fascinating. He's studied, this is his main area. It's incredible, and he's listing so many instances where for some reason last minute people pulled out of what they were going to do and it saved their lives, or it's caused this to happen. And for some reason, particularly there's a case of acrobatic stunt pilots who never go out of sync, but last second one of them for some reason pulled out and the other one ended up crashing. So people tend to have this intuition. That's an area that he searches. But yeah, it's a book called Intuition. I think you'd like it. So am I staunch down the path of, psychic ability is not real? No, absolutely. I'm not at all. And I spent a lot of time in my meditations and seem to, again, this is stuff that I don't typically talk about on here, but seem to connect to what we would naturally call whatever the source is. And you can feel your body come alive in that meditation, and you just get guidance or answers or explanations. So are we all connected by that? Yes, I absolutely think we are. 100% agree with you. Just to what degree, some people more than others, how closed off they are to it. But yeah, yes, short answer is yes, I agree.
Connected to something, the unified field of infinite creative potential. Some people have called that God. Some people have said spirit guides, higher self, soul, oversoul, many names for it. Angels, creation. Yeah, tapped into something. Yeah, higher mind. I think we're all tapped in. Hello, Shirley. Mark also said he's a Bondi boy here. Are you still living in Bondi? Shirley here from Canada. Hello, darling one. Yeah, so I was saying to Phoenix, you know, I read a book by Richard Bach. In fact, Richard Bach's books were some of the first books I ever read on spiritual topics, but he was into flying. He was a pilot. He's still alive. You're still alive, Richard. He's still hanging in there. I interviewed him probably about 12 years ago on Sydney radio, and he wrote a book called Hypnotizing Maria, which is a story, again, about a pilot, but that he meets a hypnotist. And there's a story in that, and watching your show where you've got the guy on stage and you tell him that he can't move and he can't get up and get the pictures. There's a story of the hypnotist that has told this man he's in a cage that's made out of stone and that has no walls and no doors. Sorry, no windows and no doors, and he can't get out. And here's this man on this empty stage beating against these brick walls, and he's terrified because he feels like he can't get out, but his hands start bleeding, physically bleeding,
really?
because he's beating these walls. And again, the book is all about how our beliefs create our reality. So that's one of the most stunning things in the book, Hypnotizing Maria by Richard Bach. Have you ever had anything like that happen on stage where you've been working with hypnosis on guests? Like, tell us some of your stories.
Oh gosh, not particularly along lines like that. I have had people whose ailments, and I don't mean out there curing cancer or anything like that, are just physical injuries that have completely fixed. Now, I didn't intend to do that. Sometimes it's just, I guess, when someone realizes the power of their mind and what it can do. One lady contacted me saying that her husband had this injury or this bad back for the last, I think, 3 years, and for the first time in that time he's had no pain. But the biggest responses I have, and I do put this in some of the shows again just as a little extra because I feel like it empowers people or inspires them, I will get rid of someone's phobia or their anxiety live on stage, and to see the expression that person's face. And particularly, I had that at the Mind Body Spirit Festival. Actually, I had people side stage afterwards and just in tears because for the first time they didn't have what this burden was weighing them down so heavily anymore, whether it was an anxiety or a phobia or something along those lines. So mine are more very psychological like that, but they do tend to transition over into physical injury sometimes. Now, you've got to be cautious. If I were to say, if someone came to me and said, oh, I've got a bad knee, it's in pain, you don't just get rid of the pain because they're potentially going to do more damage to the knee. But how this is working, this is just more the realization of their mind and possibly letting go of something that is psychologically causing a physical ailment. I mean, there's a lot of good indicators to suggest that how we feel or our moods or our mindsets contribute heavily to physical illness too. So perhaps it's due to that.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you listen to people like, the Abraham material, if you ever listened to any of, again, channeled information, Esther and Jerry Hicks. Do you know the Abraham material? No?
Abraham Hicks, is that?
No. Yeah, Abraham Hicks. Yeah, you know the Abraham
I have heard
material?
some of it. Yes, I was sent some of that. Yeah.
So they're teachers of deliberate creation, teachers of the power of the mind, and it's channeled material. And I remember hearing someone years ago asking the question, they were talking about the power of belief, and they asked Abraham, so you're saying that if we cut off our arm and we absolutely believed that it would grow back, it would? And they're like, yes, that is the power of your mind. Like, that is the power of your mind. What do you think about that? Have you?
I mean, that
seen
sounds like an extreme experiment. I wouldn't volunteer for it personally, but if you do look, I mean, other areas, Milton Erickson, I think the grandfather of modern day hypnosis, don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure it was polio that he was bedridden for and paralyzed, and he pretty much came up with most of what is hypnosis today, and was able to recover from the polio and become fully functional again, and one of the greatest, well, yeah, definitely the greatest hypnotists of all time, I'd say. It's very, very much worth looking into his story about that. In terms of curing something. Milton Erickson is the father of what's called Ericksonian hypnosis.
I haven't heard about
so
him.
if you look up his story on polio, and you'll see that he was indeed bedridden and not in a good way. And so being trapped only in his mind, that's all he had was his mind, and he made his way out of it.
I've got a story. I once knew a man called Malcolm. I've lost touch with him. years ago I was doing salsa dancing, and I met him. I'd actually met him before, but I met him. I got to know him doing salsa dancing. He had braces on his legs, and he was trying to overcome, because what had happened was he was misdiagnosed as a boy with polio. And then later, when he was a young adult, they tested him and they said, we find no trace that you've ever had polio in your system. You've never had it. But because he was treated like a polio patient, he believed he had polio. And he was like in his 50s when I knew him. He was still believing that he was somewhat crippled and had done all his. So he knew the belief had caused the dysfunction in his legs, and he knew he could overcome it. And that's why he was doing salsa dancing. But he was still wearing the braces and still exhibiting the symptoms of polio. But he knew that it had come up because, I know, amazing, right? Amazing. But amazing.
Yes, that doesn't surprise me. And it's a similar sort of thing with extreme fears and phobias, but on a different scale. I mean, if you think about it, it's not the actual thing people are afraid of that's damaging at all, because your rational understanding of what that is will prevent you from doing it. Quite often it's the fear that it's way worse. And that fear is that belief or that apprehension or anxiety because of that. So if you're erasing that fear, it's like if someone's afraid of snakes, for example, or spiders, and I'll get rid of that phobia, they're not going to suddenly walk up brainlessly and pick up a redback spider or a funnel web. They're consciously aware of what those are, and not to do that. It's just that the irrational side of the fear goes away. And so in that instance, the belief of him being like that, that's horrendous. But I mean, it suggests also that he has an incredibly powerful mind too. And if that were changed, perhaps he should see a hypnotherapist or a hypnotist, and because that could be turned to something very, very useful.
Yeah, I'm sure he did see a hypnotherapist over his time. But I mean, he was walking. Obviously, he wasn't crippled, but he still had the braces to help him walk. But it's an extraordinary story. But I don't think it's the power of his mind. I think it's the power of our mind. Like, this is how powerful we are. Like, we can actually cure ourselves with the power of our mind if we really believed it. I watched Christopher Reeves. There's a new documentary that's come out about Christopher Reeves called Superman, because he was like one of the original Superman. He also knew that he could cure his spinal injury, but never did in this lifetime. You know, I wonder if he will reincarnate back as some healer or scientist that will make that happen. But, knowing it's possible and doing it are two completely different things, right? That's right. Two completely different things. Because there is a belief that is so strong that you don't need to believe it. It just becomes a part of your operating system. It's like, if you can stand up off the chair, you don't need to believe that you can stand up. You just do it because it's a part of your knowing. It's a part of your makeup. And that's the sort of belief that changes things. It's not, I understand it, therefore I believe it. It's a completely different thing, right?
Yeah, it's knowing. Yeah, it's a difference between, believing gets shuffled kind of to the left, just above really hoping. But true belief is knowing something, isn't it? And it's for the same reason. That's what I'm doing with hypnosis. That's why when I stick the guy to the chair, he completely believes that he can't stand up, or for that fact of what you're saying, knows that he can't stand up, when the reality of it is that he could, but that's what's holding him down. And I use that as a metaphor for so many other things. It's not just about being stuck to a chair. It's about whatever holds you back in life. When you realize that you're your own obstacle, that you're your biggest obstacle, or your mind, but if you can change that belief or that knowing, then then you're capable. That's kind of, they're the chains that hold you down, really. So freeing yourself of those is great. And I like to use that because once the person stands up, they're not just standing up and freeing themselves from the chair. They're standing up and freeing themselves from a lot of things that have been holding them back in their life. So it's a good moment. I like that.
So how did you get into all this? I mean, what made you think this is what I want to do after studying with monks and learning hypnosis in Las Vegas and London? I've got a few questions here. We'll start with that. But do you do private sessions on people too, hypnotic private sessions? So that's the second question.
I do.
But what?
Yes, I do. I had ceased that for a while because the performances were so frequent. It was difficult. But I've only just, due to popular demand, you might say, I've had a lot of people come through where they haven't had success elsewhere, and I can't turn certain people away. And then after a while, I thought, you know what, I will focus on this a little bit. So I do schedule those in as well as the rest of the keynotes. But like your original question, how did I get there? No, I never planned to be doing this by any means. It's cracky. Where do I start? I started with the body language book. Actually, funnily enough, the original version of this body language book was on my dad's bookshelf.
Put that back up again. What's it called?
Yes,
put that back up because of
body language by Alan and Barbara Pease. Well, there we go. It's kind of blending into the background there. That's not helpful.
Alan Pease. Yeah, put it in front of you so that the.
There we go. That's about the only angle it's going to kind of work.
Alan and Barbara Pease. Yeah, he's great. The body language guy.
Yeah, he's great speaker, great trainer.
Is that guy in Australia?
10 or 11. Yeah, no, they're based in Queensland. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
But they're globally known for that. Very easy to read and understand, humorous, comical, which made it great as between the ages of 10, 11 years old for me to read. It was the only book. So to give you a background further, mum and dad were self-made multi-millionaires when I was little, and then they lost it all to fraud. And so we had a tough upbringing after that. And with that particular book we didn't have a Nintendo or anything along those lines because those were a bit unaffordable. And that was the only book on Dad's home office bookshelf that had lots of pictures in it. And so I would sit there in on a lot of these meetings that he would have at home every Friday night or once a month on Sundays and just observe people just for hours and link it back to this. And then you'd go to school and I would see the differences in how kids' body language in my classes would be similar or varied to how adult body language was. Quite often with kids, it's more accentuated. And then that just stuck as part of who I was for a long time. And I just left that after a couple of years and it was just part of who I was. And later on, I had a mate that went to these dance classes and I thought, yeah, that looks fun. I'll go along to that. And that was fun. And surely about a year after that, I started going to these martial arts classes in the same area. So I was training for both a lot of hours during the week. At around, I think it's 16, I had to let go of like the ballroom and Latin dance side. You mentioned salsa. So I let go of that just to train full on with the martial arts side of things, which at that point, when I'd reached, I think 17 years old was when I reached the national team. And it was 6 hours a day, 6 days a week, constant training, which was a lot on top of school. So it was 2 hours before school, 2 hours after school, then 2 hours at night. And then, as you say, I went over to China to study with monks a couple of times, which was a heck of an experience. And after that, came back to Sydney and was teaching that at still such a young age. And for extra cash, I started doing some Latin shows and then got picked up to perform or asked to perform on a cruise ship around Asia for 14 months, where I did that in the feature shows and was working with a Las Vegas magician who I sort of fell in love with magic there and photography. And then he trained me a little bit in the photography and taught me less about magic, but more about creating and figuring it out for yourself, basically. So it was books then, but what he did recognize was my ability in reading body language. And he said, there's an area that's similar to magic that you should possibly look into called mentalism. And it is magic of the mind when it's the trick side of things. But he was very conscious to point out the hypnosis and those other areas. So after learning that sort of thing for a few years and continuing that, I loved that, got into underwater escapes. There's footage of me on TV doing a locked in a water tank routine, which funnily enough on stage you'd think is terrifying, but something eerily peaceful about being in that water tank for that bit and just hearing the music and focusing on what you've got to do. I know that I'm jumping around a lot of areas, but this was an unconventional career progression path at the very least. So yes, as I say, 25, went to Las Vegas, and there happened to be probably one of the world's fastest street hypnotists that was there in our group, and someone didn't show up for, as one part of our sort of group training, and he started teaching it, and I picked it up straight away, loved hypnosis, found out how powerful it was, used the knowledge and link between meditation and all that sort of training, and it just gave me a lot more of an edge. And I was able to create with it. And then with the group in London, as I say, they were really pushing the boundaries of what was known. They were working with a lot of universities over there on the power of hypnosis in the mind. And we just started doing experiments and tests and discovering areas of hypnosis that hadn't been used before and finding ways to make it stronger or quicker. And yes, so I just designed shows after that, did festivals, saw private clients more often back then for the hypnotherapy side of things, and just started speaking. Now, I know there's areas I've left out, but it's kind of a long-winded answer as it is. So that's how.
Yeah, wow, what a fascinating life you've had, really.
Wild ride. Very incredible
wild
ride.
Yeah. Putting it all together. And how did Catherine and Mick find you for the Cosmic Consciousness Conference? Because it's not really the same sort of gigs that you normally do. How did you meet them?
Well, I think initially they contacted me because I think what they were, it sounds like what they've got is going on is great. I haven't been to one yet, but they have speakers that they at an amazing venue location. And I feel like initially they sort of were looking, maybe we should have a form of entertainment at night. And they'd found my hypnosis. And then through email, we were talking and discovered some other parallels. They might have had the same apprehensions or reservations about a mentalist, perhaps as you initially did moments ago. And upon chatting with them, I think perhaps they felt, kinship's probably not the right word, but a safety in my mind frame towards certain areas of spirituality as well. Like, again, I'm firm about where I am, and I would say that I'm more of a science-based or proof-based individual. However, through experiences that I've also had, I also know that you can't rule things out, which was one of the great things about working with the professor and some of the tests that we had to do at Uni of New South Wales. That was figuring out ways to really find out the answer. I'm sorry, I can't give too much away on that. It's NDA, but yes.
Moby says here, this is fascinating. I agree. I wonder if Phoenix, as a veteran hypnosis, finds it easy or hard to be hypnotized by someone else. That's a good point.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I was, for the longest time, terrible. I was the worst candidate, and I felt, how can I learn to do this? How can I be doing this constantly if I'm not the best candidate for it? Which you would think is unusual given a background in such meditation. But then eventually it did come about. I was then, a good colleague of mine in London was able to do it, and it was quite an experience, and it was used. So I have another occupation as well in emergency services, and typically PTSD can set in for certain things that you see in your careers, and usually I'm great with it. They don't affect me, but there was this one incident that was starting to echo a little bit in the back of my mind, and that was what I chose to work on that particular day when he did that, and since then it's been absolutely fine. So I have had that, and also other areas of self-hypnosis or guided hypnosis, or things that I recognize as being hypnosis-based, like gateway programs and things like that. So those I'm definitely a lot better at it now, but it took me kind of a while for my mind to adapt to being hypnotized. What a great question.
Yeah, it's a great question. When I was a kid, I remember I was at the Snow, actually. I suppose I was about 14 or 15, and there was a hypnotist staying with us, and he couldn't hypnotize me either because my mind was too strong. I was just full of questions. How's he doing this? What does he think he's going to achieve? He's not going to control me. Like, my mind was going crazy, and he couldn't get through to me. And I had a client the other day. Resistance. I was in resistance, a strong, powerful, questioning mind. And I had a client the other day who's the same. And I have never failed in taking people to meet their spirit guides, ever. And I failed with him. Like, I couldn't get him to quieten his mind. And I knew he was thinking because I could hear him thinking. I could feel him thinking. And I'm saying, what are you thinking? And he wouldn't answer me, and he wouldn't answer me. And I'm like, I'm still thinking about it. I'm like, I'm going to crack this. I've got to go back and crack this. I can crack this. I can get this guy to quieten his mind. But yeah, it's those questioning, powerful minds that you've got to get through to get people to relax enough so that they can open and expand. And have you ever heard of Tom Silver?
No, wait, Tom who?
Tom Silver.
No, Marshall Silver.
A hypnotist, a stage hypnotist like you. I had him on the show back in 2012, and unfortunately it's uploaded to an audio platform because he was on Sydney Radio, and I uploaded it to, but that doesn't exist anymore, so I haven't got the recording of him. But he shared a story with me about regressing a client. He was regressing people into past lives. So he did that in his private practice as well as doing the stage hypnotism like you do. And he's quite famous. You've not heard of him? I'm sure he's still alive, Tom Silver. He's not that old. Anyway, he told me a story about contacting this person's past life like a couple of 100 years ago. And the person was a doctor, And he had a few sessions with this person. And one time he would keep asking the doctor questions. And then one time during the hypnotherapy session, the doctor in the past life experienced this hypnotherapy session as a voice in his head pestering him and asking him all these questions. So it was like in real time. He was alive in real time a couple of 100 years ago. And he said, "Oh, you again, you're back, that pestering voice asking me all those questions. What do you want? And why do you keep asking me all those questions?"
Wow.
And Tom was, and he was like, I'll never forget that story, even though it was so many years ago and I've spoken to so many people. Yeah, so this understanding that we're leading these lives linearly, and we die and come back and die and come back. He was talking to the past life of this client who was still living his life and experiencing the session as a voice in his head and saying, "Go away, stop asking me all these questions." Yeah, crazy. Have you ever experienced anything like that?
Time portal to someone in the past. Wow, that's interesting. No, look, there's been some interesting ones over time. I can't even think of any right now, but nothing quite like that where I'm talking to someone through a time portal of the personality. That sounds amazing. I would love to have experienced that. Some questions I would have asked. I would have gone right back to ancient Egypt and started with the how.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Susan says here, "I love using hypnotherapy to help me get into the inner healing journeys these days after the induction. My higher self takes the lead and the practitioner barely has to facilitate." Well, exactly, Susan. Once we get those questioning, that mental interference out of the way, that's exactly where we can go. Yeah, we can talk to our higher selves and let them channel through us. Which you've heard of Dolores Cannon? Have you heard of Dolores Cannon?
Yes, I have.
Yeah. So that's what she wrote all those books through her clients, who she got into a state of super consciousness and channeled all this amazing information. Yeah, and just got that personality questioning mind out of the way. Yeah, out of the way. So with you, when you're put into a state of hypnosis, can you get that questioning mind out of the way?
Yes. Yeah. As I say, there's a fine line between meditation and hypnosis. I mean, hypnosis is a state of hyperfocus. That's why people, most misleading word in hypnosis, I think, is sleep, because you're not actually going to sleep. Your mind's going to a state of hyperfocus where it takes an idea, as I say, wraps around it until it becomes its reality. In these deep meditations, I can as well. I think, look, you can never, I don't know that you can ever focus on just nothing. Focusing on something small, even like the air, as the Buddhists would explain to you, focusing on the air going in and out your nostrils is a good focal point, because you're not focusing on anything too in depth, but as you focus on that, your subconscious goes around and does what it does. But I do so, yes, I have a particular ceremony is not the right word, ritual, you would say, that I do when I'm going to go into a deep meditation. I do this weekly, probably multiple times a week now, and there's a few elements in that I've found that really allow me to have profound realizations, to the point I'm going to compile them and put them into a book, or perhaps just on an Instagram page that isn't my current Instagram. So you've got my Instagram page that is this, the show sort of thing, TV bits and pieces, all that sort of thing. I do need to open another one because I have a separate website as well that is for the keynote speaking, memory training, body language, hypnotherapy. There might even be a third one that I will start to post, I guess, some of the revelations or some of the messages that I receive. I know that sounds a little out there, but it's whatever guidance has been put forward, and some of them, to me, they're very profound, and maybe they can help other people too. But whatever that connection is, it's just such a I've given up pretty much all TV and streaming services, because there is so much more spiritual entertainment and guidance. And entertainment's not the right word. I'm exchanging entertainment for connection. And it's really profound.
That's what I was saying to Phoenix before. Like, I don't go out to normal entertaining anymore because I find it kind of boring, but a show like yours would be really interesting. And I'm like, when's your next public show? But Moby's read my mind here. The next question I had teed up in my mind, and Moby's kind of almost got it down, was when you're doing hypnosis on stage with people and they are experiencing what you're the commands that you're giving them, or the suggestions that they're giving them, they are experiencing. Is Is it an agreement between the two of you? Like, what's going on? Why are they, or have you had people on stage that just don't do it? You can't get them to do what you've asked them to do?
Well, I think a lot of that comes down to the pre-talk, which is the part at the beginning. There's a couple of things that have to be in play there. First of all, I'm very big on having everyone know, look, you are not going to be humiliated. You're going to leave feeling amazing like rock stars, and you're in good hands. So that makes a lot of people feel more comfortable. And also, how often do you get this opportunity? You might not get it again, and you've got a good supportive room here. You've got a well-trained hypnotist or who is going to look after you. What have you got to lose? So that certainly helps people get up as well. In terms of what appears to be handing over the mind, and I think we also have to differentiate a big difference between having a strong mind and being resistant to certain things. But if you're resistant, that doesn't mean you have a strong mind. Anyone can be resistant. You can, if you don't want to be hypnotized, you won't be hypnotized. However, everyone can be. If you can go to sleep, then you can be hypnotized. It's just allowing your mind to follow the guidance of the hypnotist. And so long as you allow that to happen, you can question it all the next day if you want, but just allowing it to happen is, and then once they start to experience the phenomena, and they start to feel good, say, why would you stop? So then they continue. For example, my hand's moving because that's one of the things. People's hands will get stuck to their head and then they can't pull it off. And then they're as conscious and awake as you and I are, but their hand is stuck to their head. And so that's the part where their conscious brain is kind of debating, well, I know that I'm my normal self and I know that it's my hand. It shouldn't be stuck to my head, but it is. But then by allowing them to release that, so forth, they release their hesitations or skepticism with it, and they just are better suited. But it is about making them feel comfortable, being trustworthy, and I have a history that you can look up, and there's zero humiliation in there as well in the shows. So making them feel comfortable, giving them the idea that it's a rare opportunity for them, and that they're going to have a great time, and so they go for it. Do I send people back to the audience? Yes, very few. In fact, I've got a really high percentage hit rate, but quite often I do have to send people back. If you see some of the work on the cruise ships, people flood to the stage and I have to cut them off because the stage will be too full. And I have to quite often wake up a lot of people, or bring them back to their regular conscious state and send them back to the audience just for safety's sake. But there's different types of inductions as well. So what might work the best with one person might be different to what works best with another type of person. And so again, it doesn't mean those people that I've sent back who haven't gone into the trance state can't be hypnotized. They might just take longer or require a different technique. So everyone can be, but yeah, the less resistant, the more open to it you are. I find actually people who are skeptical about it, people think, oh, I wouldn't go into hypnosis because I'm skeptical about it. That's quite often they're the best ones too. You can be skeptical. I think healthy skepticism is good for anything really, but as long as you're open to it. Yeah, skeptical is one end, resistant is another. You're resistant, you can't be hypnotized unless you allow it.
I guess that if you're really not open to it, you're not going to volunteer to go up on stage, are you? So you're not going to get too many people that just doesn't happen to.
You get a couple who think, oh, I'm going to outdo that. You're not going to hypnotize me. I'll prove it. But
I'm going to show you.
That's not my challenge either. Like, there's only limited seats, and the ones on stage are the best seats in the house. Honestly, they are, because I leave everyone feeling like they've had an 8-hour sleep and a 4-hour massage. So they are the best seats in the house.
There you go.
But there's no point getting up to see if you can try and resist it. And I say this in the pre-talk. Let me save you the time. You can. You win. I'm not Gandalf. I'm not going to tap you on the head with a wand and suddenly you're hypnotized. All I'm doing is facilitating the guidance, and your mind is actually doing the work. It's how powerful your minds are.
Yeah, we are powerful beyond measure. I think, I'm going to get galactic, but I just want to remind people that you're listening to ATP Media, Accentuating the Positive Awakening Consciousness with Karen Swain. And my guest today is Phoenix Montgomery, and we are streaming on the United Public Radio Network and the UFO Paranormal Radio Network on 107.7 and 105.3 FM syndicated radio all over the place. Also streaming on Rumble. I think we're streaming on Odyssey. I'm not sure if it's working on Odyssey. I love the platform of Odyssey. It's a blockchain platform, video platform. Twitch, Facebook, YouTube, all over the place. What was the question? I was going to go, yes, I was going to get galactic. So my galactic guides tell me, us, humanity, that we are so sloppy in our focus, our mental focus, and understanding who we are as powerful creators, that our imagination is powerful. Like we've been conditioned to believe that it's just your imagination, or it was just a dream, darling. Like, pay it no attention. It doesn't have any importance in your life. Like, we've been conditioned not to understand the power of thinking, the power of focus, the power of imagination, and that we are indeed genius creators. And the galactics who I chat to, and many other people that I have on the show chat to, have this mental agility. They can do things with their minds that we can't even dream of, because they have tuned that power. They understand the power of thought. You've had a bit of a galactic experience yourself. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yes, certainly. This is why, probably the reason why I guess I do what I do, and why I sift through what's real and what's not, but also why I tend to have what I would call a truly open mind. And you know, here this is an exclusive, Karen, because this is not something I've ever spoken about on camera or publicly. I guess you would call this coming out of the saucer.
Coming out of the saucer. It's coming out of the UFO closet.
Yeah, that's right. No, I've seen and had a close-up experience, and not just me. My mother was there, my baby sister was there, and we were quite young. I was about, I think, 6 years old. And my sister would have been 2, and there was an experience. And look at this. We had a property when I was that young, big 5-acre block with bushland around, and there was a craft, and this craft was pretty much outside. I was on the upper level, outside the window, and sorry, it was outside the window, and I got up, and you know, I'd been put to bed. I never went to sleep early. I was never an early sleeper kid. I remember going out over the railing saying, "Mum, there's a spaceship outside." Sounds ridiculous. And then she was saying, "Right, go back to bed." So I went back in there, and it's still there. And then I went back out and said, "Mum, the spaceship is still there." And so she, you know, as any parent would do, they probably just had enough of it by that point. But then the noise started, and then it was like this churning mechanical noise, and she came up and looked and realized, and then went into a panic state, as you would, because Dad was out working, and it was nighttime. And so she grabbed me and hid me behind the couch, which, you know, apparently, I don't know, I guess you don't know what to do. Yeah. But the couch seemed like the good option. And then she ran up to get my baby sister, and it was quite terrifying for her as we heard it over the top of the house with this. She had heard it, she says, but she thought it was similar mechanical noise to what you'd hear at night roadworks with like machines in the distance. It was that sort of noise.
Really interesting. I have to say, yeah. I've spoken to many people who have had ET UFO experiences, and all of them say it's absolutely silent.
Yes, well, the second one was, and I'll get to that. I'll definitely.
So the mechanical, I'm thinking, you know, like it's all coming out, it's all out there in Congress, and there's a big conference coming out in the US Congress on the 19th of November, 13th, I think.
I thought it was the 13th,
is it? Yeah, that talking about this UFO stuff, and maybe it was back engineered, and it was like you were experiencing humans that had back engineered some technology flying over the house, and that was the mechanical noise. Because when it's not back engineered, we know when it's the real deal, it's silent. But yeah, please go on.
Well, I mean, how do we know how many civilizations are out there that it could possibly be? Maybe some are silent, maybe some aren't. There were differences between that and the second experience, which I will get to in a moment. But I did see it, and it was a classic disc shape, and it did have a ring of flashing lights. Mum saw it too. And then it, like, eventually then it sort of passed over, and then it was gone. Admittedly, out west, and where we work was look, if you headed out west, there was a military base out there, so who knows. But then, you know, Mum had said, look, don't tell people about this at school. I realized, you know, for good reason, so I hadn't. And then when I was at school, my friend, she told me she'd seen it, and then our parents were talking in the car park afterwards about what we'd seen and what they'd seen, and realized that, yeah, they saw the same thing that night. And and then that week, 6 other people, all in a line heading out that direction, had witnessed this same craft. And as I'd said to you, Karen, a few years ago, Mum had breast cancer, and we weren't sure how that was going to go. So we recorded, just for our sake, a video, a podcast where we're in a room, and I was talking to Mum about that experience and what it was like. Interestingly enough, a lot of other phenomena seem to happen at that house. Now, I've never I didn't buy so much into the whole spirits thing. But then if you hear things or read things like what's been said about Skinwalker Ranch or other areas where other phenomena seems to pop up after that, well, that happened at this place too. And I know there was one instance where Mum was in the laundry, and we had sort of those French glass doors, and the handle just started going and she could see through. There's no one on the other side, which would have been terrifying. Any person that moved into that house, if you look at the sales record since then, which I think is I put on that recording, didn't last there long. There were only short purchases, and people would move out soon after that. And then eventually,
so it was haunted. It was a haunted house.
Well, I don't know. The track record didn't look particularly great, and then it burned to the ground in the end. So, but that was all to do with the first one, and that's in that the video that we recorded together. Now, we only recorded that together, I think, during COVID, because that's when I was looking after Mum and she was ill. And that was, this happened when I was like 6. So this is, late 30 something years ago. And then no more than 3 months after we recorded that, we happened to be outside, and this particular place. So the first place was north of the Hills District in Sydney, if you know that area. The second place was on the Central Coast in an area that's a known hotspot, that in 1994, a lot of people saw something interacting with the water. There's a lot that tends to go around this area over the Brisbane Water District. Now, I was, that's interesting. This last one though, which was, a couple of years ago, 3 months after we recorded this was very different. Another one came past, and we were both looking at it, and I knew well enough not to say what it was, but I looked at Mum and said, you seeing that? She said, oh, you mean the large boomerang looking thing that's flying above us? Yes, I'm seeing it. This one was absolutely dead silent. There was no sound. The night was still. The most interesting thing about this, which is out there, is that this thing was mostly transparent. It was sort of like it had some cloaking sort of ability that you could see through most of it, but it was like a giant boomerang. It was the height. I remember looking at the gum trees. So it was 2 of these big gum trees in height, which is not, it's like it's like 3 whales long. It's probably not a good measurement. So probably, I guess, 90 meters maybe up, but it was huge, a giant sort of triangular boomerang shape, and it made no noise, and it moved like an air hockey puck on a table, how they just glide with no friction. It sort of glided over with it, and then it slowed down as it went over us, and then it zipped off. And again, no noise, no wind disturbance, you could barely see it. But what was apparent to me was the difference between the two. Now, this one seemed a lot more technologically advanced. Is that because our technology has advanced in that time as well, or is it because it's from a different civilization? I don't know. Right. But another thing that was very apparent was the first one wasn't trying to hide itself. This one was. So whatever its purpose was, it did not want to be seen, or it wanted to be more camouflage. So that was interesting. My first thoughts were, that's not a war adversary.
That was in 2020, did you say, the second one?
No, that wasn't 2020. When would that have been? I'll have to look at the date of when we filmed the first video. It was probably, I can look it up, because after this, I'd logged onto a UFO page, which I'd sort of followed for a while, and reported that in there just privately to the guy that runs it. And so I hadn't even put it on the page, and then other people started posting in the area about seeing the same thing too. So the second one had a group of people. There was parents of school kids, like my former partner at the time had school kids, and they were saying that they saw it. So a lot of people did see it, but interestingly enough, they saw it over a 2-day period. So this thing was back in the area 2 days in a row.
But that was in the last few years. It wasn't when you were.
Yeah, last couple of years. Was probably maybe 2021.
So you're following all the Ross Coulthard stuff and the David Rush stuff. You're following all that. Yeah,
definitely.
Too. Yeah, I'm loving it. I'm just loving it. Yeah, disclosure is
just getting hushed up, though, isn't it? Like, who's got the power to control Congress? Like, obviously,
What's Desley saying? Really, Desley, how you doing? She's saying, really enjoying this conversation. Never thought UFOs being silent. Yeah, maybe they were noisy to get his attention. Yeah, maybe. Maybe they were noisy to get. So, how'd your mum? Is she better, or what's happening?
She's good now. Yeah, she made full recovery, which is wonderful. She's great.
Made full recovery.
Wow. Yeah. Eternally grateful for. Yeah. she's good. And you know, she's the same as me. She's always got her eyes on the sky. You know, I mentioned this sort of thing to one of my mates too, and I remember him saying, well, how come I don't see them and you've seen two? And I said, how many nights do you spend out looking at the stars? Like I would, especially during COVID, I was out there whenever I could, 3-4 nights a week at the very minimum.
Yeah.
And if you're sitting in staring at a TV screen, you're not going to see anything, are you? But if you're sitting out there and you just love the stars, the constellation, and the concept that you are not just looking at stars in the sky, you're standing on the edge of a planet looking into real-time abyss of a galaxy or a universe, then you have a love for it, especially if you've seen something before. And shooting stars, I'd much sooner sit out and stare at that all night and contemplate the universe than be in watching a streaming service.
Exactly. Most people are inside either watching a screen or their phone, you know, scrolling through their phone. They're not looking up.
Exactly.
So the question I was going to ask, it keeps popping out of my head. Here we go. Have you had any hypnosis sessions around that event? Did you have any missing time that you remember, which is crazy because like it's hard to remember missing time. But when you're a child or in between that time and after that time, like any other strange phenomena that happened around the sighting?
No, I haven't. With those particular events as well, because there are multiple people involved, and you know, it was from the get-go to until it passed. I don't think that there was. I think I was just fortunate enough to be right place, right time. I don't know. I don't know. But I don't.
So
think
you haven't
had hypno sessions.
You haven't had a regression session since then, like a couple of years ago. That would be interesting, Phoenix.
Yeah,
that would be interesting. Or even, you know, go into meditation and ask your mob, your team, your spiritual team, or the unified field of infinite intelligence or whatever stream of consciousness that you tap into that informs your life. What was that? Why did that happen? How's that connecting to who I am? And like, you haven't.
I think I tend to hit it up with bigger questions. but you're right. It's anything from just understanding perspectives of things. It's incredible sometimes how I can get a completely different perspective on something or point of view, and how enlightening that is, or a complete zoom out, or sense of questions, ideas of, you know, what life is, and our perceptions and fears of everything, all the way through from birth to death to the universe, really. But even just day-to-day things, like it's really helped guide me in decisions, in clearing out clutter. There's so much noise in our lives today, and you kind of said something earlier to that. So much noise and so many opportunities not to be our best selves. Just really focusing on purifying that, and just being as self-aware as possible, and accountable. This whole accountability thing is a big thing and a big part of that, and I like to really focus on that and strip away. Like it's too easy to give into being morally or ethically lazy. And I'd like to think that I've always been a moral or ethical person, but there's areas where I could just do better, or just going out and just doing things for the sake of kindness. Like I run little self-experiments like that too, where I'll go out for a month and just make sure that every day I've deliberately done something good or kind, or just good for the world. And it's funny how it comes back to you as well, because if you set yourself a task to do that every single day, that can be that's a lot to think about if you're deliberately plotting or planning things. And I won't let myself get too lazy and be like, okay, well, today I'll just give to charity. Okay, I can let myself have that sort of cop out once every while and again, but I've got to go out and actively do it. But that's time consuming as well. So when opportunity falls in your lap, where you can, like, I had a bloke come off a bicycle in front of me one time, and so that was just the best opportunity. I was so grateful that I didn't actually have to think and plan that day to go and to help him with that. And then you get to a stage where you're grateful when those sorts of things happen, and that's a really nice place to be in life. And I think we get so intrinsically focused, and people are so stealthy based on social media and things like that, it's just becoming too much within ourselves and polluted with that sort of thing. Whereas if you start just giving, focusing on being kind outwards, I think it would really help things like depression, and you know, especially we've got highest rates of reported depression. So, you know, whether it was reported or not before, or ADHD and things along those lines, I think the answer doesn't lie in pills as much as people would like to think. And it lies more so in doing and doing good for what's out there for everyone.
Ah, beautiful.
Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
What did you say?
Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Thank you for coming to my. Have you ever done TED? Have you ever done a TED
No,
Talk?
I haven't actually. No, of all the speaking engagements,
Would you like
I've done it. Yeah, I would like to actually. Yeah, it'd be great.
Well,
Which
I
topic?
think big changes. I think this Uluru conference, like I said to you, there's a whole lot of people that have come out to Australia to activate ley lines and energetic lines and do stuff in Uluru. There's big shifts. There's big change afoot in 2025, and I really see that for you too, Phoenix. I see your spiritual journey really expanding exponentially. He'll start talking to your ET mob, your alien mob. If you want to meet Phoenix, he is one of the speakers at the Uluru conference, the Cosmic Consciousness Conference. Let me just share my screen here. In Uluru, where are we going here? There you are there, because there's some amazing people going out there to speak. Judy Satori, she's a friend of mine. She's a channeler. She's pretty out there. So you're more of the mainstream ones, and these guys are great. The Strongs, they're very connected to the land and the indigenous culture. And Esha Patel, she's chatting to her galactic guides and mob all the time. She's a complete cosmic gal, that one. So you're going to meet some really interesting people. For people that want to, meet Phoenix out there at Uluru, if you're in the States or Canada and you've always thought about coming to Australia, you have an opportunity to meet some of the Australian speakers at the conference. You can do Uluru as well. I've got a link underneath that gives you $50 off the conference if you want to attend the conference in the description. Just go there, and I'll also have the link on my webpage where I'll have more information about Phoenix. So, I'd be really interested for you to do like a hypnotic session yourself to sort of delve into the subconscious and superconscious and see what that sighting was all about. Because you've heard of the channeler Bashar, Daralanka Bashar.
Who was that? Sorry,
Bashar. There's a guy called Daralanka in the States who's been channeling an ET consciousness that he says is actually him in another dimension, in another time and space, in a future time. An ET that he channels. He's been channeling him for over 40 years. His initiation to being a channel was spotting a UFO, just like you did, a triangular UFO, not a boomerang one, but a triangular. That was his initiation, and then all this stuff started happening in his life. So it's happened to you more than once, though, when you were a kid and then recently.
Yeah, I'm incredibly grateful for that. I thought after 30 years of not seeing another one, well, that was a once in a lifetime thing, and you'd think that some people don't get it at all. And then to have it again, I was ecstatic. I just wished that I'd had something that could have recorded it. I mean, not that you're going to get much from a silent and mostly transparent object at night, but if I'd had some means of recording, it would have been great. But who knows? Yeah.
Yeah, we've got about 15 minutes to go, but Bobby says he has to go, and he just wanted to say a huge thank you to you and Phoenix and everyone in the chat. This was really very energizing. Much love. Yeah. Was it energizing? Yeah.
Oh, good to hear. Very kind listeners and viewers. That's lovely.
Yeah, we've got a great audience. But as I said, most of them are listening on syndicated radio, so they're not in the chat. But if you do want to come over and go to the YouTube or Rumble channel or Facebook and be a part of the chat, I'd love you to come over to the chat, because there are a few people in the chat and lots of you listening on, through the syndication. But what would you like to leave us with, Phoenix? What pearls of wisdom do you want to give to the world?
Goodness me, you've put me on the spot there. I wish I had that preempted and written down. I have so many things. There's so many things there, but do good, be kind, detach yourself from everything modern, and enjoy your experience in this life. Just a small one.
What about harnessing the power of our mind? What tips do you want to give people? Like, especially people that don't know how to meditate because their mind's driving them crazy. They don't know how to focus. They're all over the shop. Like, what do you want to say?
Yeah. If your mind's all over the shop, it's start with progressive relaxations, the ones with the muscles tensing and then relaxing, you'll probably find great improvement with that as well. Don't worry if you can't focus on nothing. Your minds aren't supposed to think in negative, so focus on something, but keep your focus on that whilst you're breathing. In fact, make it your breathing, and simply just let your minds go after a while. In reality, there's nothing that you can do wrong, but create that space for yourself and allow yourself to take time to get it. It doesn't have to, you don't have to get it perfectly straight away. I didn't. And yeah, just believe in yourself, because there's where we are. I mean, how do I say this? We have everything that we need for this life from the moment we're born, and that's a good realization too. You're given everything you need. And I know some people aren't born as able as others, but if you weren't born with what you needed for this life, you wouldn't still be alive. So there's a good power in that, and I hope once people take that on a bit more and realize it, then they become more empowered too. So I'll leave it with that.
Beautiful. Yeah. We're just, I think as the human race, we're just starting to understand the power of our minds, the power of focus. I mean, the Indians have been talking about it for years, haven't they? That's why they, the classic image of an Indian with a turban on sitting on a bed of nails, like he can harness the power of his mind not to experience any pain or in fact pierce the skin. When I was young, when I was like in my 20s, early 20s, I was studying naturopathy, and my teacher, who was teaching us anatomy and physiology, was sharing with us the knitting note that she could put a knitting needle through her arm and come out the other side and pull it and have no hole and no blood and it wasn't a trick. She was talking about the power of the mind. I have to say, when I was 23, it was a bit beyond me back then, but I was just starting to entertain these powers. And I think that she was dying to share that sort of information, but she was speaking to people that wanted to, learn about herbs and diet and stuff like that. We weren't really focused back then on the power of the mind. I think that it needs to be inside all our education systems, don't you?
Yeah, I do. I think there's a lot that could be upgraded in education systems, down to memory training. People think they have a bad memory, but it's you don't even really have to practice it. It's the techniques that you use. Even mathematics, there are better ways of doing a lot of maths that the mentalists would use in speed math that could revolutionize the way people think and learn. But yeah, honestly, I think being able to change your mindset is one of the biggest things, and I think it's one of the most impressive things. And when you can do that, then you're on a good path, and your whole life will change. So hopefully that happens for everybody.
Have you heard of the Australian guy called Jain Mathematics? Jain, spelled Jain, I think he spells his name.
I don't think so. Maybe. Not by name, but I might know who you're referring to. Yeah,
he's extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. He's passionate about teaching a new mathematics to schools. He's had a lot of resistance. He's got a huge following, amongst the sort of conscious spiritual community, but he's not had a lot of traction inside mainstream education, which is a shame, because he has a completely new, and he's totally into sacred geometry, and he's just amazing. As I say, he's got a huge following, but the mainstream world has not come to the party yet with his new mathematics science. But he's an Aussie, he's an Australian guy. He's absolutely fascinating. Yeah. Thanks again for
my pleasure.
And so if people do want to see more of your work, where can they go? You've got your website. Let me share your website here. Yeah,
that's there. I've only just started up a different one for the sort of keynote speaking and hypnotherapy. That is mindrevolution.com.au. My entertainment one is mentalistphoenix.com.au, which is that one right there, which is based only on the entertainment side of things. Other than that, it's Instagram, which is @mentalistphoenix. And I'll start up some new, possibly those Instagram pages that I was referring to. I would like to get those underway very soon, particularly the one that has some of the more profound discoveries and conversations with the source, whatever that may be. But yeah, but so also got it out of me, by the way. Like I say, and just to cover, that's what I was saying before too. I've never divulged or crossed over what I do in entertainment with my experiences with UAP, and this is why I've never talked about it, because I wouldn't want my experience as an entertainer to to potentially pollute or risk people saying, oh, it's not true, he's just an entertainer, because that was a really real and personal experience both times, with family, with other people around. And I've never wanted to cross them over. I understand that my job as an entertainer could be a conflict there, but thank you for, I guess, allowing a bridge for me to talk about them both. So thanks.
Yeah, well, I think the world is changing, and I think, you know, the UAP UFO conversation is out there on mainstream news. Ross Coulthard has had, I religiously watch his shows on News Nation, which is a mainstream news station. It is a little bit more alternative than your classic, you know, NNSBN or whatever they're called, the CBN or whatever they're called in the States. But yeah, I mean, it's a mainstream, and he's having conversations with people about all sorts of topics, consciousness. And one of the guys was talking about how he'd been researching UFOs and thinking about it passionately and sort of like obsessed with it. And he was getting, he's a scientist, and he was getting a bit freaked out about his passion for it. And he thought, I think I'm just going to drop this. I think I'm going to just let this all go because it's interfering too much with my life. And then this guy walks up to him at a conference and sits down and starts channeling a message to him from the ETs that said, we understand that you've been thinking about, you know, giving this up. And he had not told anybody, not his wife, not a friend, nobody, that he was thinking this, but the ETs were listening, and they were channeling through this human person saying, we would ask you to not give it up and to continue with your work. You're doing great work. And so this is like on a mainstream news station, this guy's talking about channeling. And I'm like, boy, is the world changing if you're hearing that sort of story on News Nation, you know. But Ross, another Aussie guy, is doing a great job in getting this information out there to the mainstream. So we're not too far about, you know, it has been a psyop. It has been a hypnosis psyop that was put out into the mainstream that if you think about aliens, you're crazy. You know, that was a program, wasn't it? It's a program that we've all bought into, that
the stigma.
Exactly, the stigma, when in reality, how could you not think about it? We live in this massive universe, you know, this infinite teeming cosmos.
7 trillion galaxies and counting.
How could there not be intelligent life that's informing humanity? I mean, how could there not be? It's so logical to think about it in that way, and yet we've been under this hypnotic conditioning that it's crazy to even think about it. So I think that paradigm is shifting, and
it seems to be done for a deliberate purpose too. So that's the interesting part. What's behind that, or who?
What's behind that? Yeah. Well, what's behind it is, you know, a lot of people like you have been informed by a higher intelligence that might be a galactic or ET intelligence that is showing you the power of your mind. And although telepathically and not really identifying itself to you, you're just calling it inspiration, if you like, or passion, whatever we want to call it. I used to call it common sense, but we're all being inspired by this higher intelligence or these higher civilizations that are informing human consciousness about the evolution of our consciousness and how we can open our minds and be powerful genius creators of our reality. Yeah, I think that they're informing us. And some people talk about it openly like me, and some people just call it passion, inspiration, common sense, intelligence, whatever that you want to call it. Thanks again, Phoenix. And have a fun time in Uluru.
I will do. I'm looking forward to it. I hope to see everybody there, and thank you for having me, Karen.
Thanks again. Bye. Okay, we've got about 7 minutes left of the show. Thanks, everybody who's been tuning in. Thanks, Shirley, Susan, Moby, Desley, Mark. Lots of fabulous people tuning in. And remember, if you do want to go to Uluru, maybe if you are in Canada or the States and you've ever thought about coming to Australia, there is a link under this where you can get a $50 discount on the conference. But no time like the present to come to Australia. As I say, there's been a lot of people out there. I was a part of a conference this morning called I've got it on my website, the Extraterrestrial Diplomatic First Contact Conference for 2024. I actually had to record my session, but they just had the live conference this morning. Extraterrestrial Diplomatic First Contact. They are people who are going to build an emissary and for meeting our Star Nation brothers and sisters. and they had a conference on this morning. But there is big stuff happening, and a lot of people were out in Uluru changing, being guided to be there. I was speaking to Prageet from the Stargate experience, and he was saying that he was told 30 years ago that he'd come to Australia and do some grid work. And then last year when he was in Egypt with Viviane Chauvet, he got the message to come out to Australia, to go to Uluru to do the work that he was told about 30 years before. And like, oh, wow, big things are happening. And then I had another girl on the show whose name escapes me now, also a speaker at the conference. Let me see if I can find her there, who says that the ley lines have balanced. Yeah, Rachel Vaughan, who's big into the ley line stuff, she was saying that the ley lines have really shifted and balancing to create more harmony and more balance within the collective. So it should be a fantastic conference, and I'm sure that Phoenix will have a great time. Let me know if you go. I won't be there. I'll be here in Sydney, because we're also putting on a big conference here in Sydney next year in June, called the Afterlife Convention, exploring all sorts of things. It's like we're hoping to attract around 3,000 to 5,000 people. It's in a huge venue, the Horden Pavilion in Sydney. And we're going to have people talking on meditation and near-death experiences, lots of mediums doing psychic readings, talking to dead ones and all sorts of things, channelers. So it's a big woo-woo conference. We're not getting into the UFO conversation quite yet. I don't think the mainstream are really ready for that in Sydney, but we'll get there in such a big conference. If it was a smaller conference, we could do it. There's lots of conferences around Australia that are talking about that. The Cosmic Conference is one of them. But so if you're wanting to come out to Australia maybe next year and meet a whole lot of people, end of June, we'll be putting that on in Sydney. Come on down, come down under and meet us. How many minutes have we got left? 4 minutes to go. And if you're wanting to know more about me, I never talk about myself on my own show. Just go to my website, karenswain.com. I'm a teacher of deliberate creation, teaching people about the power of your mind and your belief systems. What I do with most people is point out what the belief is active in their vibration, that is causing the limitation in their life. And the underlying belief of all negative, stressful thinking is the belief in separateness. You're separate to love, separate to God, separate to the unified field, separate to what it is that you think that you want, where in fact we are all one connection, connected to an amazing unified field of infinite intelligence that is allowing us to create anything that we can think of. But we have this belief and this separation, which causes this I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough. It causes all the fear and all the stressful thoughts that we believe, which create our reality. So once we start to reconnect, which is where meditation comes in, to that unified field of infinite creative potential, and feel one with that energy, then you take back your power to understand who you are as genius creative potential. And you understand why you're here on the planet, to expand awareness and consciousness as we move to a new experience on planet Earth. Tomorrow, I'm going to be on Preston and Dolly's show, The Light Gate, talking to you. It's a day before the US election. It's actually the 5th of November here in Australia, but it'll only be the 4th for you guys when I'll be on Dolly's show. So tune into that. They are streaming on the United Public Radio Network and the UFO Paranormal Network radio network on at 8 p.m. Eastern time on the Light Gate tomorrow. So that's going to be fun. I always love talking with Preston and Dolly. They're two of my favorite people. Preston, well, both of them really are the most. I've known Preston a bit longer than Dolly. The most fascinating people I've ever met when it comes to this subject. He is an amazing astral traveler, conscious astral traveler. He's having me on as a guest, but I just love to interview him because he's just a wealth of information, a UFO researcher. I wonder if Phoenix has ever heard of Preston. I'll put Phoenix onto Preston because I know that Phoenix is interested in this subject. So I look forward to yeah, speaking to you all again on the United Public Radio Network and the UFO Paranormal Radio Network tomorrow on The Light Gate with Preston and Dolly. Thanks again for listening and watching, and I'll catch you all next time. We've got about a minute left to go. Bye for now.